Jessica, is there
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us at the Globe Women's Collective live-streamed International Women's Day event. The Globe Women's Collective is an initiative that leverages focused reporting, events, and roundtable discussions like this that offer insights and expertise to move the needle toward gender equity in the workplace. All of our panelists joining us today are experts and thought leaders who have previously been featured in Globe Women's Collective storytelling, and they're here to discuss a topic that we've identified as being really vital for helping women move ahead in the workplace: mentorship and networking. And with this year's IWD theme being, of course, break the bias, we're going to dig into the ways that women can break through bias barriers with the help of mentors, of sponsors, and a strong professional network. And so I'm going to start by introducing myself and our panelists. I'm Jessica Robinson, the content lead for Globe Content Studio and the oversight editor for the Globe Women's Collective. And with us is Rachel Wong, co-founder of digital networking platform Monday Girl, who also joined Uber in its early days in Canada. We have Kayla Isabel, CEO at Startup Canada, the gateway to Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem, who also hosts the hashtag Startup Women podcast for women entrepreneurs. And we have Nazia Shirin, Senior Product Manager at Amazon and an adjunct professor at University of Toronto's Faculty of Information, who has long been a passionate advocate for women in tech. I want to start by asking each of you about your personal perspective and experiences with mentorship. And so I think, Nazia, we'll start with you. Can you share a time when mentorship helped you get ahead in your own career?
Absolutely, Jessica. Thank you for having me on here. It's such a great topic, and I'm really passionate about it. And mentorship actually is one of the reasons how I was able to traverse my career. I started off as an engineer, and I studied computer science. And you sort of get into the work field thinking that's the only career you will have because that's what your degree has taught you. And then I used to have this mentor who started to see different qualities in me. And he actually helped me start to take on enterprise roles. And he saw in me something I didn't see in myself because I thought I was meant to be a coder. And that was the start of the value when I truly understood the value of mentorship, because they look at you in a different lens than you look at yourself. And that's when I realized how much value it can bring to someone's career. And I decided to start giving it back to others. So since then, I've always been involved in mentorship groups, forums internally in the organization, outside in University of Toronto. So that was the start of my mentorship journey.
Yeah, it's such a great insight, the idea that you kind of see yourself a certain way, but having someone else that can come in and show you, actually, you fit in this box too, you're just not looking at it, is a really great aspect. Kayla, I see you nodding a lot. What's been your experience personally with mentorship?
I love that. That completely resonated with me, Nazia. Mentorship has been core to everything that I think I've prioritized in my career, that finding leaders that I could connect with over coffee and just pick their brain on, like, how did you get to where you are, and asking these foundational questions. I did that first year of undergrad, even before that in high school, in middle school, even as like a little entrepreneur in 5th grade, building my babysitting business. So I think asking for help and exploring those types of conversations has definitely been innate for me. And core mentors really stepped up as I navigated leaving university. I think I was in the communications field, and I volunteered a lot with different associations and nonprofits, trying to get a taste of what was out there in comms. And I had some really incredible advisors, and what they recommended to me was really exploring, continuing to leverage their network so that there was always a secondary intro from those conversations to keep the conversation and learning going. And they set the pace that I hold myself to now, of this sort of busyness and always having this momentum. A lot of my mentors early days, would advise me, if you need something done, give it to a busy person. And that was like the ethos that I tried to live and breathe, so I could really advance professionally faster. So love mentorship. I'm all about this conversation. We do a lot of work at Startup Canada in this space too.
Yeah, mentors really do serve as role models in so many ways, not just in terms of like what your career path can be, but even like, what your day looks like, and how your schedule can be made to make you more effective and productive in all sorts of ways. Rachel, what's your experience been like with mentorship?
Yeah, no, I definitely want to echo what Kayla and Nazia have mentioned about just, all the benefits of being able to see yourself from a different lens, because you get to do that with mentorship. You get to see yourself from a different perspective, which is really helpful, especially when you're just getting started in something, whether you are, still early in your career or you're still in university. It's really, really nice to be able to have that lens and borrow it. One thing I'd like to mention is that mentorship looks different for different people. And I think I can speak from my experience where when I was starting off in tech, the tech scene in Toronto was still fairly small, still fairly niche. And I just couldn't really relate to some of the advice that I was being given early in the days, where it's like, the lean in, or the stand up and, be brave and make your point in a meeting. And that just didn't totally resonate with me, being a more introverted Asian American woman. So that was something that I really thought about when it came to building out the mentorship program for Monday Girl. And I realized how important that representation was, and being able to really identify those pain points that might resonate more with different people with different backgrounds.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit, because I think that there's definitely a sense that mentorship looks one way, or networking looks one way, and networking can have a lot of I call them dreary stereotypes associated with it. It's it's a cocktail hour. There's always drinking involved. It's a predominantly white, predominantly male filled room, and everyone's trying to figure out what connection they can make to get ahead themselves. But Rachel, how do you reimagine the notion of networking so that it's more personal and like practical and rewarding?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. Our tagline on the Monday Girl website is "Networking sucks. This is better." Because we've been there. We've been at an icky networking event where there's a bunch of guys, and you're like, "What am I doing here? Am I giving out these business cards for absolutely no reason, or just like a very strange reason?" So, we want to re-envision that, and it really started off Monday Girl 4 years ago as events for women that they could come together, feel comfortable, and be able to have a safe space to ask each other questions. That was like the key of it, and be able to discuss careers and mentorship as well in a more comfortable, safe space. And then we've been able to evolve that into the digital space that we have that's called Monday Girl Social Club. So they get access to one-on-one mentors. They don't have to go through the hoops of reaching out cold on LinkedIn. They can actually just go ahead, book time with one of our mentors through the roster, and there you go. They have their coffee chat set up. We also teach them on how to really have an effective mentorship and networking conversation, and that's really key for us. And then we also do to teach about the necessary evil of reaching out cold. If you're going to do it, how do you do it? So those are some of the key things that we think about to try to reimagine and remove the ick from networking.
Yeah, I love that. I always think of cold LinkedIn DMs as like the contemporary cold call, because of course, lots of things have changed in the digital world, but certain awkwardness remains, I think, when it comes to the world of networking. So Kayla, let's say you receive a cold LinkedIn DM from someone that you're not connected with, and they want to pick your brain. What's your response? Do you feel like it's an appropriate way to start a mentorship relationship, or do you have like a preferred approach that you recommend?
This is such a great question. And as somebody who did this, 15, 20 years ago as well, it is a space that I want to be present for, that, we really need to open up our calendars to the extent possible and give back, especially to, emerging women leaders and those that don't have access to, senior leaders in other organizations. So I'm there philosophically. The challenge is calendars. We are incredibly busy as leaders and as entrepreneurs and as business women. So how do you create that structure in that space? And that's where I think, to Rachel's point, this structured mentorship approach of, tapping organizations that already have an inventory of mentors who have agreed to volunteer their time or offer their expertise. That structure can liberate some of that pressure that you feel doing that cold LinkedIn call when you have no connection other than just an interest in that person. So I'm a big fan of structured engagement. So for example, through Startup Canada, we have a Startup Women mentorship program. We connect entrepreneurs with advisors, with other support organizations, with mentors. But the other side, those mentors have already agreed to dedicate that space. So it's an easier entry point. You already can see their calendar availability. So, Friday at 9:30, I want to connect with Kayla. And then I can show up really presently and dedicate that space. So my recommendation is to find some formal structure.
Definitely. Nazia, I want to ask you the same thing, because I mean, we're talking about people who are busy and pulled in a lot of directions. You know, are the senior product manager at Amazon. You also teach through U of T. I know you're part of all sorts of different associations and networks and do a lot of advocacy. What's your response if someone, cold messages you and is looking for insight or mentorship? And what's your advice when people are looking to do that sort of thing?
Oddly enough, I do it myself. So there's two. The way I look at it, I'm a big fan of structured mentorship. One of the reasons is, as both Rachel and Kayla talked about, like there's a certain art to it. There's a certain help you need when you're kind of going into that space, and also the mentors are dedicating that time, but they have busy schedules. But I've also been in a place where I want to explore different industries and leaders from different industries, or if they've made a LinkedIn post or there was an article about them and something really resonated with me. I have done so in the past where I reached out to them and I said, I would love to have a coffee with you. I never think coffee is going to turn into a mentorship. That's not a presumption I have. I see it as, if there's a chemistry, it will become a mentorship automatically. So I always look for that chemistry. But I do ask for, I cold DM people and I just say, can I have a coffee with you? This is what I do, but I love this about your career path. I love what you said in this article. And I have actually made some real connections that way as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good separation. Not every touch point becomes a mentorship experience or relationship. You can connect with someone and have a great chat, and that can kind of be it. Not everybody needs to be your mentor. And I think you can also, overextend yourself as a mentee too, right? Like have too many people that you're turning to or expected to be meeting with, and you're maybe getting a lot of different pieces of advice, and it can muddle things instead of giving you clear direction. I would love to know, what's the number one question that you believe mentees should ask their mentors? Rachel, we'll start with you.
This is a really good one. I really so I'm actually going to piggyback a bit off Kayla's point of tapping into the secondary networks and leveraging what the call is to be able to extend into other people's networks, because that is really, the benefit of being able to reach out to someone cold, someone that's, not within your circle. So being able to ask, is there anybody else at the end of the call that you think might be a good fit that I could speak to, or you think could help me with X? And if you can be really specific and pinpoint what X means for you, I think that is a tremendously helpful question, because that way you can really also strengthen that relationship with that mentor as well, because they feel like they're also giving you that helping hand. So that's going to be my little tip here.
Awesome. Kayla, what about you? The number one question you think mentees should ask their mentors?
I think entering into any formal or informal mentorship relationship, clarifying expectations. What is the expectation of the mentor? What's the sandbox that you're playing in? What's the amount of time that they're dedicating? What are the areas that they are willing to talk about? Perhaps they really don't feel comfortable advising or providing mentorship around finance or around a specific part of your business. How do you make sure that you're making the most of your time with that mentor within the space that they're also feeling comfortable to support you in? So I think clear roles and responsibilities.
Awesome. And Nazia, same question.
So it actually has to do with something you see on my wall. It says, do what you love what you do. So the first question I always ask any mentor, and I love being asked it, what makes you get up in the morning? And the reason for that is I'm driven by passion. I love doing what I love doing. Like I like to get up for that. At the end of the night, if it's a long day, if I made impact, makes me happy. And I like speaking to leaders who think that way. It can be a passion about anything. It can be passion about cooking. It can be passion about, finance and everything. Like for me, that's a huge driver. And I love to have those conversations about passion. And I do find even my mentorship kind of leans in that way. So I know that's one of my strengths. I can help someone find their passion, talk about that. So I know I can add that value. And on the other side, I look for that side from a mentor as well. So I know I always ask that, and it's possibly a bias of mine, but I do believe that, you come into this world every day should be something meaningful to you.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love the idea about being passionate about finance because while it's not something that I share, I think it's very important that we have people be passionate about finance in the world.
Well, women especially, right? One of the
Yeah.
topics I've had with one of my mentors is that she always wondered, I talk about passion for my work, but why do I always say I don't care about salary? And it's a very female trait. So she actually coached me through that and said, you can do what you love, but you should also get paid for it.
Correct. Yeah, that's a huge thing. And I mean, finance and even the tech space, two areas that you've dabbled in, can often still be perceived as boys' clubs, right? And sometimes it is about those limitations where women are perceiving themselves, like we talked about, you see yourself as being a certain way or your skills as fitting into a certain box, and you're not necessarily looking for those sort of cross applications. But Nazia, what suggestions do you have for women who are looking to get into these industries when they think, oh, I don't know if I'm going to fit in here?
So I think one of the things about the tech industry, I would say that it has evolved. Tech is everywhere. Every sector is tech, right? It's so I don't think it's something. It's how it was, say, 20 years ago when it was perceived as it's only for men and they sit in front of computers. I think there's lots of roles right now that are creative, but it's also very much focused on technology. So me being a product manager, it's very much you're thinking through both things. It's very creative while it's technical. But I do think going into any type of field where it is male dominated, there are certain challenges I know I personally faced where you do end up in a room, it's predominantly male. I have been in rooms many times where I was only female, and it can be intimidating. But my advice always is be yourself, because diversity of thought matters. If any organization truly believes in changing and evolving into what we should be, diversity of thought matters. And I always suggest that if you find that that's not respected, there's a lot of organizations out there, and you should really be where you're valued and you're respected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that goes for whether you're in early career, more established. Like, I think we can all feel, what's often talked about as imposter syndrome, although we did produce an article a little while back for Globe Women's Collective that says we shouldn't use that term anymore because it implies that there's something with the individual and not with the system and the structure that's at fault. And I want to flip gears a little bit because, of course, we've talked a lot about approaching mentorship from the mentee perspective, but the mentors are the other half of that puzzle. And it's just as fruitful, but, just as much work to be a mentor as a mentee. Kayla, we talk a lot about how mentorship, supports women early in their careers, but how do you think mentoring makes you a more effective leader?
I love this question because it's definitely a philosophy I live and breathe. It is so helpful sometimes to get out of your own circumstance and to plop yourself into somebody else's business and navigating hurdles that might seem completely different from what you're experiencing in your day-to-day, but you can extract such helpful learnings in just approaching a challenge from a different perspective. So I think empathy as a leader in really understanding those pain points. Myself at Startup Canada, obviously we support entrepreneurs every single day. So me mentoring entrepreneurs, I really get to have a better understanding across every industry. What are the day-to-day challenges that you're facing with? How can we explore some solutions? I'm not going to advise you to do X, Y, Z, but it really sort of stretches that scope of thinking. And to Nazia's point about diversity of thought and perspective, I feel that mentoring gives me that in other ways, layered in with that empathetic approach. It also keeps you a little bit humble as well, of reminding yourself, the challenges that a new emerging entrepreneur or new leader is facing now. Perhaps that's something that you really dealt with 3 years ago, and reminding yourself of the progress you've made and celebrating that, but also recognizing that all of us learn every single day, and it can be really challenging in those moments. If you can cushion that a little bit and say, I've been in that situation, I really feel, I feel this pain or this tension. Here's what I explored. Here are some things that might be helpful for you. It keeps you a little bit more humble. You don't always have the answers at every single moment. You've learned a lot, but it keeps you on your toes a little bit as well. So I think it's an important give back moment as well for women leaders. Pull additional women leaders up, especially within the entrepreneurship space. And that's the only way that we're going to make actual change, because we can't keep talking about women's empowerment and elevating women. Like, we have to physically do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Rachel, I'd be curious to know how much of that is reflected in your own experience, because of course, as co-founder of Monday Girl, you're not necessarily directly mentoring, all of your participants, but you sort of serve as an overarching mentor for everyone who joins in a way. So yeah, how does what Kayla was discussing reflect in your own experience?
Oh, it resonates like a ton. I think the main thing that really draws me back to building Monday Girl and the mission that we have every single day is seeing the Slack messages that we have in our private Slack group. Because the questions that are posted you can just really see it strikes a chord, because the conversations and threads that start building and building, because you suddenly see that reflected in your own experience, and you're like, wow, I'm not the only person here that thinks so. X problem is this, or, I don't know how to navigate this, right? So I think it really goes to show that having that diversity of thought and being able to have that safe space to have these conversations is so crucial. And that's what's really going to help us move towards, hopefully one day, bridging that pay gap, right? So I think that's the first place to start. And then the other thing that is really, really important to us, as we're thinking about mentorship and we're thinking about ways we can connect women, is how can we tangibly do this, right? It's one thing to say hey, I'm going to give you advice, but we actually are able to see that through these mentorship chats, women are actually getting jobs from this. Women are actually getting pay raises and promotions, and we're tracking that. So it's really, really awesome to see tangible success there.
Yeah, it's when we came up with the concept for this panel event, it was really focused on the idea that mentorship is not a nice to have for women in the world of work. It makes a difference in your trajectory as a person having a career in a way that I think doesn't necessarily always get emphasized. It can be talked about as a really great help, but the tangible results from having that sounding board essentially for your own experiences and ideas, and being able to leverage all of the learnings, as Kayla was talking about, Nazia, before, of people who've been through the journey that you're now on, and can share with you the insights, learn from my mistakes and my wins just as much. It gets people raises, and it gets them new jobs, and it opens up doors in all sorts of ways. But it does make me think, and I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on this, about how mentors can also protect their time, because it can be a lot of pressure to say, it's up to mentors to help bring forward the next generation of women in the workplace. Kayla, maybe I'll start with you. Do you have any thoughts on how mentors can preserve their own creative energy and time too, while of course caring so deeply about this topic?
It is such an important question, Jessica. And I think today, this International Women's Day, I've seen more conversations around this point than I ever had. That, we're putting this additional pressure on women to solve the problem that is created through these systemic issues that were not developed by women. So why are we taking on that burden? I think there's also an interesting conversation around rest, that women just need a moment to pull back and to not take on more, and to be silent and quiet and have that space, and that freedom to say no. Because often, you ask women to help, and they'll come to the table and they will try in so many ways to support you. That can be exhausting, and that's an additional, responsibility layered to many, for working moms, for anyone in this space. So I think back to my point around structured mentorship, I think it's a beautiful way for mentors to feel like they have structure around how much time they can volunteer or support. And I think really just having the confidence to say no is important. You don't owe anyone anything concrete, right? This expectation to show up and go above and beyond If that's what you want to do, absolutely. If that completely fills your cup, go for it. But that can also ebb and flow. When do you have more flexibility in your life? When can you, shift different responsibilities based on different stages of your entire life as well? When you have small kids, mentoring somebody might not be on the top of your priority list. So give yourself that permission for that ebb and flow, permission to say no, and look for that structure where you can develop it or set that boundary yourself. There's great literature out there on how to set habits, and setting boundaries are habits. And we can all, I think, get better at doing that as women in general.
Oh, I love that. The idea that setting boundaries is a habit. Yeah, that resonates for sure. Nazia, what about you? How do you feel that mentors can go about protecting their time and energy?
Everything Kayla said really resonates. And the thing is, I did feel it once I had my daughter. So at first, when it's just you, you can kind of, I could do, late night coffee, something like your schedule doesn't revolve around someone else, a little human, right? So I did feel that there was a time when I did have to start setting boundaries of how often I can even meet someone. And I know it's one of those things, you do feel that responsibility, like Kayla was saying, that it does feel like I really need to do this because there's so much work to be done for women without mentorship, championing them. No one knows about a lot of strong female talent just within the organization. So I always keep a folder full of resumes of really strong candidates. So if I see a role or someone mentions something to me, I will flip that resume because I love the impact. I love seeing numbers get better. But sometimes it is a lot of work when you have 10 people who want your time and you only have so little time left. And you're taking your free time when you can read a book or go for a walk, but you feel responsible that you should have this conversation. You can help someone. So it is a tough, it is a tough balancing act because I do feel guilty when I say no, but I also realize that I need some downtime as well. With a career, I also work part-time somewhere else. I have a daughter, there's other things that's happening in life. And I love how Kayla phrased it. It's setting boundaries and making that a habit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's a refrain that floats around the internet about how saying no to someone else can often be saying yes to yourself. And doing that sort of change of mindset around, if you say yes to everyone else, you're saying no to yourself in a lot of ways, and that's not better for them or for you. And I think about how, we've talked about it and Kayla touched it head on. It feels like a lot of the pressure to fix and break and, change things for women is on women, when it's not necessarily women's structures that we're looking to break through. And so it makes me think about the role that men can play in the mentorship or sponsorship of women in the workplace. And Nazia, you mentioned at the beginning that, it was a male mentor who sort of set you on a path that you hadn't seen for yourself. I'd love to know a little bit about that experience for you.
So I actually think a lot of men are in a position to make this difference. If you look at, especially the fields I'm in finance and then tech, very dominated by men. The senior roles are often men. Most of the CEOs are men. If there is going to be someone who's sponsoring someone to be their, the next CEO, it's going to be that person. And a lot of the men are in there just from how things have been in the past, right? Our world was almost designed that men go to work and women stay at home and take care of children. And we are pushing through that. We've been breaking that stereotype for the last how many decades. So, but the numbers are still not great in certain industries. So I was very glad myself that it was a male mentor. He was in a position that he could helped me navigate, pushed me into a role that, actually built my career. I had a job before, but that shaped my career. So I think men really do need to play a very active role in mentorship and sponsorship to create that balance, especially in the senior roles.
Yeah, absolutely. Rachel, what are your thoughts? Where in, the world of networking where you're trying to, take away all of these sort of stereotypes and biases, where do men play a role for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely speak to having some really important male mentors in my career. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was in tech and I still am. And I'm very grateful because those are the people that are in the rooms that you're not a part of. They're in important conversations, and them being able to advocate for you, right, and sponsor you when you're not there, that goes a very, very long way. So being able to really have male mentors and allies understand that it's beyond just setting up coffee chats, right? It's beyond just, really giving that person like recognition privately. A lot of it is how do you advocate and how do you speak up for that person when they're not in the same room as you?
Yeah, absolutely. That idea of saying your name in rooms you're not in is huge, and of course applies to mentors of any gender, but especially when we know that, statistically speaking, men are still likely to be in rooms that women aren't in. Kayla, I'd love to get your sense of this because, of course, you work with entrepreneurs, and so entrepreneurs aren't finding themselves in, a workplace where they're trying to hit the corner office. They're running their own businesses. They're creating their own ventures. But so where can men play that role of sponsor or mentor for these women in the business space?
It's a great question. I think to Rachel's point, I love that you specifically highlighted not just mentoring privately. Like these conversations can't just happen in these sort of separate. That you're feeling this great ally and supporting women, etc. It has to be very visible externally. And within the entrepreneurship space, funding is the biggest challenge that we see for women-led businesses. We know that women get an abysmal piece of the pie when it comes to VC funding, angel investment, and even from banks and loans, because they are not applying at the same frequency that men are. So you see these parallels in so many different ways in entrepreneurship. I think having more male or more women investors on the other side of the table, like how are we creating boards of directors or investor communities or those spaces that are traditionally that have power? How do we make sure that there's more representation in those spaces? We're seeing a huge boom in entrepreneurship for women. It offers more flexibility. There's a way to really live purposefully, and to Nazia's point, identifying your passion and bringing that to life through a business. But the support structures around women entrepreneurs, that's where we need to make sure that we're showing up appropriately and investing the capital so that they can both start up and ultimately scale if that's something that they're interested in. So for men, invest in women. Purchasing power. For men, who are you buying from? You can support a woman entrepreneur today, this morning. Go to a local coffee shop that's women-led. Think of every micro moment where you can support a women identifying entrepreneur, big or small, and amplify. How are you in different conversations, to Rachel's point, saying the name of a woman colleague or a woman leader? How are you echoing their ideas and giving them credit as well? If you have peers in the entrepreneurship community, CEO to CEO or founder to founder, making sure that we're amplifying the perspectives of women with that association to their name and to their credit, that we're also not taking the ideas of fabulous women. So there's such incremental change that we can do. And enough is enough. Like we can't keep having these conversations around how men can show up. And it's not because they're dads. It's not because they're, I have a sister, so this means something to me. It makes good business sense. And we just need to get there. Yes. We can't be talking about this in perpetuity forever. We have to actually act on it.
Yes. Over the course of, since we launched Globe Women's Collective back in September 2021, which of course is the result of the power gap, which is the study that the Globe did about the consistent, not just pay inequity, but power inequity in businesses all over, organizations all over Canada. It can feel like we're, the points are the same and the stats are the same, and everybody agrees that this is the right thing to do and that it's even the fiscally responsible thing to do to support women and encourage them. And yet, International Women's Day after International Women's Day, we find ourselves talking about the same things. And I see it in the content as well. We've published pieces about how want to support women, fund them was a recent headline that we put out. And another one was about, how men can even address casual sexism in the workplace, like providing the tools and the insight to, this is what we can do to engage in a meaningful way. This is not just women's work. It's about work for everyone. I want to be mindful of all of your time. And so I want to close out with one final question that I'll pose to each of you. Of course, all of you are leaders and mentors who have a lot to share with young women in your own right. So I'd love to know what's one piece of advice that you wish you knew in the very first year of your career. Rachel, why don't we start with you?
I think the number one thing is just being open to learning. I think there's so much pressure. I see it and I hear it from younger women that are starting off. A lot of it is social media. A lot of it is like the glossy LinkedIn posts about, where they are now. But just knowing that this is the best time ever to just soak everything in, and whatever happens, you're learning. Good or bad, you're still learning and you'll be able to adjust. So just being open to that flow.
Amazing. Kayla, what about you?
Yeah, I think be kind to yourself, be gentle on yourself. You can have incredible ambition and hustle and, propel your career forward, but don't take the pressure of the world on your shoulders, especially when starting a business. Entrepreneurs, their mental health struggles tremendously, when you're starting a business, scaling a business, any stage of entrepreneurship. So be really gentle on yourself. And remember that you are the main character in your own story, but nobody else cares as much about your inbox or your career growth or all these different variables as much as you do. So remember that and find comfort in the fact that everyone is dealing with their own challenges, their own priorities, their own hustle, and try to stay rooted in what you actually are trying to accomplish, and not get distracted with all of that noise.
I love it. And Nadia?
For me, the advice I would give is you don't need to have one mentor and you don't need to be exactly like your mentor. You have to find your own leadership style. And that can mean that you have three mentors who brings three different perspectives that resonate with you. And you come up with your own leadership style. I know for a long time, I thought you have only one mentor and you run every idea by them. There is no such rule as that. You can have as many mentors as you want, and there's no hard rule for that. So I think that's an advice I wish I had early on.
Amazing. What a great note to end on. I want to thank you all for joining us today, our wonderful panelists, Rachel, Kayla, and Nazia, our Globe Content Studio team that's working very hard behind the scenes right now to get this live, and to everyone who is tuning in. And of course, none of this would be possible without the generous support of our partners with the Globe Women's Collective, our founding partner, Visa, our brand partners of Visa Wealth, Dentons, First Capital, KPMG, McKinsey & Company, Novo Nordisk, OMERS, and Suncor. Our supporting partners, the A Effect, BDC, Grant Thornton LLP, Rakuten Kobo, and Pay Equity Office, and affiliate partner Lean In Canada. If this event piqued your interest about all things mentorship, networking, women in work, I really encourage you to check out the content in our Women in Work editorial section found on the homepage of theglobeandmail.com. And we also have a Women in Work newsletter that publishes once a week, so you can get all of that content straight to your inbox if you prefer. If you want to get in touch, you can reach us via email at gwc@globeandmail.com. Or you can connect with the Globe Content Studio, which is, of course, the content marketing division of the Globe and Mail, on any social media platform at Globe Content. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great rest of your International Women's Day, everyone.